Hi, I'm Angela J. Davis. I'm a Los Angeles-based writer, and it was my sheer joy to be one of the authors of the Zip Code plays. I actually can't remember a time that I was not in love with theater. I've always been drawn to the arts generally, but theater in particular, I think, has a special magic because it is designed to be alive and on the ground, and even particularly in contemporary theater when productions are making use of all kinds of technology and projections and sleight of hand. Still, I think part of the magic of the experience is that it is live and on the ground. Of course, that's being mutated somewhat in the current climate because theaters are of necessity having to move into Zoom platforms and other types of technologies. I think I've always loved words, and the written word has held a special magic for me for a long time. I also enjoy studying foreign languages and studying the roots of words. I'm fascinated by word origins and by the mutations of language, how so much Arabic, for example, works its way into the Spanish language, and how much Spanish and Italian worked their way into the English language. I'm somewhat omnivorous in my reading, and I think writing in some ways is an outgrowth of reading. I've read a lot of both nonfiction and fiction poetry, and I also enjoy reading plays and reading other scripts. So I think all of that feeds into the writing. It's hard to pinpoint a time in my life when I wasn't in love with words or writing, because it's just been so much of my life and existence since childhood. I was writing poetry and essays for quite some time, and still write those. And I kind of always knew that eventually I would move from poetry to playwriting. I think there is an affinity between poetry and playwriting because they depend so much on the exact words and finding the right words, and words evoking action or a memory or the relationship between people. I think more than film or other technologies using script, I think writing for the stage really is so dependent upon words and the words that are spoken. I'm not really sure that I have a specific process that can be articulated in some sort of linear description. I will say that at any given moment, I usually am working on more than one thing. For example, I had a play that was produced last year at the Road Theater Company. So it was produced in 2019. But one thing that I think many playwrights agree upon is that the best playwrights never stop revising. And even after plays are produced, they go on and mutate a tiny bit before they have their next live iteration. So I'm still kind of taking a look at that play and reworking it. I also have another play that was fortunate to get some serious attention this past spring, another serious dramatic work. I feel like I'm still working on that play. Of course, I have the play that's going to be featured in the Zip Code plays, and I'm also working on some brand new work where I'm just in the opening scenes. And I tend to rotate between projects. I generally don't outline. I know that a lot of writers like to outline their work. It's never quite worked for me. It's worked for me for other types of writing, for more nonfiction types of writing, but for plays, I tend to just go with the flow and revise like crazy. I do sometimes write scenes out of order. Frequently, I have in mind how a play is going to end, and I have the beginning in my head as well, and I'm working my way from one end to the next. But the revision process is also really important, including sometimes in very aggressive ways, aggressive in terms of the impact of the revision, adding a character who might end up being the entire soul of the play, can sometimes happen. And I think also the collaborative process of playwriting is very important. And once actors read a script aloud, and once a director engages with a script, questions get generated. And sometimes those questions can lead to revisions. When an actor has a question about what a line means, I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of explaining to the actor what the background is. But oftentimes, if an actor has a question about the meaning of a line, that's a clue to me that maybe I need to take a really close look at that line, because maybe that line is ambiguous on its face, even though it meant something to me when I wrote the line. So I love Antaeus. They're not my only love. I love a lot of theater companies and a lot of writers and a lot of directors and actors. What is special about Antaeus is they have a particular focus on classics, broadly defined. I mean, they include classics as things that were written in the 1960s, which I guess, I mean, that's already getting into 60 years old. So I guess things that have survived that long deserve to be called classics. But they also do a lot of Shakespeare, and a lot of older works with big casts, which a lot of theaters are not tackling. When you see for calls for scripts, a lot of theaters want to keep cast sizes down to 6 or fewer. Antaeus is committed to the classics. They've expanded on that. In fact, the Zip Code play series itself is part of what they are calling their new classics initiative, which is very exciting. But I love the fact that the theater itself is committed to performing Shakespeare, performing classical works, keeping it alive and present in 21st century experienced theater. It's also a very high caliber theater in a small company. The caliber of actors of Antaeus, I think, is second to none. And indeed, most of the actors in their company have also performed all over the United States, if not all over the world, including on bigger stages and bigger theaters. I just think it's a gem of a company. I worked closely with Abigail Marks a couple of years ago. She directed a workshop of another play of mine, and also a director the director of this play, of my Zip Code play, Steve Rodman, had told me that he really loved Antaeus as a company. And after working with Abigail Marks, who's an actress at the company, she very generously recommended me for their Playwrights Laboratory, which is a group of writers that is by invitation. So I was, of course, honored to be invited into the Playwrights Lab. And it's been kind of a home for me. It's been a wonderful group that meets, and there are member playwrights who are at a high level of accomplishment. I feel privileged to be among them. And also Antaeus member actors who participate in the Playwrights Lab, and they read works in progress aloud in the laboratory, which is extremely valuable for writers to have that resource. So I love the company, and I feel very fortunate to be participating in their lab, and extremely fortunate that they're doing this work. I mean, this was just very serendipitous, right? I mean, we're in the COVID-19 pandemic, which I think for many artists was disturbing on a multi-leveled and in a multi-leveled way, because of course the pandemic itself is harrowing and frightening and life-threatening. and is interfering with daily life, particularly if you live in a place like Los Angeles, which is an urban center and also a COVID hotspot. So all the theaters are shutting down. Broadway is shut down. Every local theater is shutting down. Actors Equity, I think appropriately, basically said we can't let actors risk their lives to perform. And what happened, and I think a lot of us were very worried about not only what this meant for the world and for our loved ones and ourselves if we're vulnerable to illness, but I think a lot of us were acutely concerned about what does this mean for the art form that we love, namely the theater. And what happened was a kind of magic. And one by one, all of the theaters, or many of the theaters that we love, found ways of making art and theater continue, notwithstanding that people couldn't enter a theater and actors couldn't set foot on a stage. And so just by way of example, the Road Theater Company in Los Angeles, another theater that I worked with, they moved their entire summer festival to a digital format, as did other theaters across the country. The Landing Theater in Houston, another COVID hotspot, moved their entire festival into a digital format. The Public Theater in New York City produced plays that were written for the digital format, which was quite interesting. And I think what Antaeus did, which I really appreciate, was they looked around and thought, so much is happening with Zoomed theater, and as great as it is that people are doing that, maybe we should try something a little different. And what they decided, I mean, you'll have to talk to them to get their version of it, but from my vantage point, what it looked like they were deciding was to do something that could be done in the COVID environment, but would still be theater at the highest levels. And so they decided to produce a series of radio plays. And they called on members of the lab, the playwrights who were already members of the lab, to submit proposals for individual plays. And I really owe a debt of gratitude to Antaeus because I didn't really have it in my head to be writing a play specifically for radio. But when they put out the call, I just thought, oh, this is a great opportunity. Around the same time that they put out the call, there were massive demonstrations about social justice and historical wrongs that needed to be addressed, including with the toppling of statues. And I've always been fascinated by statues. And of course, they're all over Central Park in New York. But they're also in Los Angeles. They're not as plentiful, but we do have statues in Los Angeles, including in downtown LA, in front of the original train station, Union Station in downtown LA. There was a very large statue of Father Junipero Serra, who's a controversial person right now, but regardless of how you view Junipero Serra, it's undeniable that he had a profound impact on California history. Practically every city name and state name is traceable to the Spanish conquest and Junipero Serra's missions. And his statue was toppled by protesters in June of this year. And I was kind of fascinated by the statues in our midst and how they impact our consciousness. And I was also fascinated by the good and the bad that can flow from historical people in history who tried to do good. And so what happens in the play is a little bit of magic. Around the same time that Junipero Serra's statue was toppled, interestingly enough, there was a comet circling the atmosphere called, wonderfully named comet called the Neowise. Okay. The Neowise comet was also kind of close to California, right around the time that Junipero Serra's statue was toppled. And it's gorgeous. I mean, if you see pictures of it from capable photographers, it's quite a scene just to see the comet up in the sky looking like it might be headed for Earth. And so in my play, it's a bit of a fantasy with a kernel of seriousness. But what happens is the comet, in fact, stirs up the particulate atmosphere of Los Angeles, and some of the statues in Los Angeles, including Junipero Serra, who's been knocked to the ground, come back to life. And the play is about what happens next after the statues come back to life. I tried to keep it fun, and I will say that I hope the actors and directors had fun working on it. And it's also, there's a kernel of seriousness. I think the best comedy does have a kernel of seriousness. So I hope that that's there and that people see it. And I just, I hope people enjoy it. This was an embarrassment of riches. I just felt incredibly fortunate to be part of this project. And starting with the Antaeus company, which I've already talked about and which I love, and love them just as an audience member, just purely as a consumer. I think they're a wonderful, wonderful company. And I would go to see their plays and have gone to see their plays before I was at all working with them. I'll start with the director, Steve Rodman, who I have worked with before, is just a terrific theater director who also has a tremendous amount of experience in television. If you pick any primetime TV show from about the mid-90s onward, he probably directed it, at least one or two episodes. The first time that I met Steve, I was actually even a little bit worried because I knew the caliber of people that he had worked with before. And I was a little nervous about meeting his standards. But he's an incredibly hard worker. He's got decades of experience in both theater and film. He's also directed main stage productions at Antaeus and also at the Geffen in Los Angeles and at East Coast theaters, including the Long Wharf. And he was also a director at the O'Neill National Theater Institute. So it's a thrill to work with him. And what's wonderful about him is that he never, ever phones it in. He is a workaholic and has the work ethic of a genius who is fresh out of college and working on his first play and making sure he makes a good impression. I mean, he's just got a consummate, terrific work ethic, which is great. And he also reads scripts incredibly closely. I mean, he would call me or text me saying, oh, you have this line here, and maybe you could set it up a little bit better, or there's an inconsistency, and just going over the script with a fine-tooth comb many times, which is a gift, I think, to a writer. Some writers get irritated with that. I view it as this gift to me that a director is reading my script so closely. The actors, so it's a cast of 3, and Abigail Marks, or Abby Marks, plays Clara Shortridge Foltz. I've seen Abby in other productions at Antaeus and also at South Coast Repertory. She's a terrific actress, great Shakespearean actress, and can do comedy and serious drama, which is one thing that I was looking for, because Clara Shortridge Foltz was essentially, I like to think of her as the mother of the California justice system. She was California's first female lawyer. And so she has kind of a 19th century spirit about her. But at the same time, she's very much ahead of her time. She is obviously in favor of women having the vote, but she's also in favor of women being lawyers and being able to be licensed as lawyers and enter a courtroom, which was not permissible. That was an avenue not open to women until she came along. She's a true historical figure. That's who Abby plays. And I knew she would be terrific, and it was a joy to work with her. Father Serra, who does come back to life, is played by Tony Amendola, another just terrific Shakespearean actor. And one of the things about Father Serra is I tried to give him his own voice. He is a historical figure right now who's getting attention and a lot of opinion, defending him, attacking him, and there's a lot, there's a lot being said on all sides of Junipero Serra. And what I tried to do in the play is let him speak for himself, and I tried very hard to give him a voice that would be his own. And that's kind of what I tried to do with him. And I also, the play begins with him having been knocked to the ground and waking up inside his statue. So he's in a little bit of pain and discomfort. He's also been asleep inside his statue for a very long time. So it's news to him that California is no longer part of Spain. And I tried to give him his own voice. And then there is, of course, a talking bear. It's Kelly Louise Duarte, and who's wonderful, who has this larger than life. He is a newer member of Antaeus, and I had actually not known his work before. And Antaeus suggested him to both the director and myself, saying, "Oh, he's perfect for this. He's perfect." And there is something about Kelly that indeed is just perfect for this role, because he's a big guy, which obviously doesn't necessarily come across in a radio play. But I think you can sort of feel both in the way that he handled the role and also in him as a person. You can feel this sort of solidity and heft. And the other thing that I loved about Kelly is I watched a reel of his other work, and he can be scary and a little threatening and menacing, like a giant bear, which this is. But he also has this wonderful warmth about him, and this humor and this love for life, which is what the character needed. And I think Kelly was terrific in bringing those things to the role. And I think he was having fun with it, which I really, I hope all actors have fun with my writing, but particularly a talking bear, you want that actor to be having a good time with the role. And I did notice in rehearsals, he seemed to be having fun with the role and really embracing it. And the bear, I will say that the bear is kind of the soul of the play. And the bear has a lot to say to the human counterparts. And he has some criticisms of them. But he also has some wisdom. He has big ears. And he's been listening to a lot of things for a very long time. The bear is kind of the soul of the play, and he's a little bit childish. He is an animal, but he's an animal who talks. And the play explains how he got to talk. I hope that they enjoy it. And if there is a serious message in the play, there's something that the bear tells the humans to do at the end of the play, and it's a very simple message. The bear is in some ways better than us, right? I sometimes think animals are better than humans in their innocence and honesty. Obviously, animals didn't write the Ninth Symphony or get a rocket ship to Mars, and there are ways in which human intelligence and creativity are irreplaceable. But there's an innocence and a childlike zest for life that animals have, and this character has that, and I kind of give him a message at the end. And also Clara has a little bit of a follow-up message that Serra joins her in. They end up agreeing with each other about something. So I think in the final moments of the play, there's kind of a little kernel of seriousness. I hope that they enjoy it. The play is written to be enjoyed. And there's I think a sweet and life-affirming message at the end. I'm looking forward to all of them. I have great respect for these other writers, and I'm really grateful to be among them. I can't wait. I feel like I'm an audience member here just as much as anyone else, because I have not, I know as much as you know about the other plays. I've seen the descriptions that are online, and I know who the actors are. There are some terrific actors in those other plays, and there are some terrific writers and directors behind them. So I'm really looking forward to all of that. The one other thing that I will just mention is one commonality through all the plays is Jeff Gardner, the sound designer, who is a genius. He's done magnificent work, and I was thrilled to get a chance to work with him because I knew his work from LA Theater Works, and purely as a consumer and an audience member, I absolutely adore LA Theater Works. And Jeff had done, and I think still does, a lot of the sound effects for LA Theater Works, and he's just an absolute master. And the way that he does it, you really feel like this moment is unfolding in front of you. And, whether it's the clink of dinnerware or glasses of wine between two characters or a car starting. So I'm really looking forward to hearing not only the plays, but also Jeff's work. And there's also there's music going through the plays. I'm really looking forward to hearing that. It was really an amazing undertaking. One of the things that was done was, because of COVID, the actors were not going to go into a studio, right? Which is normally what you would do if you were going to record professional quality radio plays. You would have them in a sound studio. Jeff built these contraptions, which was kind of like a little box on top of a tripod, so that the actor would sound isolated, and so that the subliminal noises that none of us would ever notice would be identical as between the different actors, even though they were in different locations. I mean, it was really terrific. And there's actually there's a video on the Antaeus website right now about that process. And I think it's fascinating that they were able to do that. I think that one of the wonderful things that Antaeus has done here is they have found a way to make theater, and to make it at a time when it's very difficult because of COVID-19 and the limitations that all of us have. And it's really a gift that they are giving to Los Angeles. These plays are free, by the way. There's no charge for viewing the plays. I believe they got a grant there was a generous grant from a nonprofit organization that helped them with the professional quality rendering of these readings. But it's really kind of a gift that's there for the taking, because the plays will be available on their website and also on major podcast platforms. You don't have to buy a ticket. You don't have to leave your house. And there's some of the most wonderful actors and directors and sound engineer that you can find got together to do this. So it's a generous thing that they're doing. I think that arts in general are important. I think that particularly in times of stress and crisis, I think all art forms can elevate us and also civilize us. The arts have a unique communicative power that is not communicated through straight, as much as I love straight journalism and I'm a news junkie as much as anyone else. The arts have a power to reach us and a communicative power that is important to elevate us and also civilize us. The arts force us to look at our world in different ways, to look at ourselves in different ways, even if it's humor. Humor always, the best humor has a kernel of seriousness, and the best tragedy, I think, should have a core of being life affirming. Otherwise, who cares? And so I think the arts have a power to make us better human beings and better communicators with ourselves and with those around us. It's a cliche thing to say that the arts are a mirror of society, but I think it's a cliche because it's true. So, and in terms of supporting the arts, support can mean a lot of things, right? For the fortunate few, it means financially supporting. In this particular instance, with the zip code plays, these are being rolled out free of charge to anyone who wants to hear them in this audio format. And I do think that, again, there is a gift that is being given to Los Angeles through that. It's something to talk about. It's something to experience, even though we can experience it in the privacy of our own homes. I also think you asked about Antaeus in particular, and other theaters like it. So Antaeus and some other theaters in Los Angeles, I would cite the Road Theater Company, and also the Blank Theater and some others. What they do is they try to produce new theater as well as old. Well, Antaeus has a predilection for producing the classics, but they also produce and develop new work. And so do some of these other theaters in an intimate environment. It's not the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. It's not South Coast Rep, which are also extremely, I think, valuable institutions for our city. But what they are doing is having the theatrical experience in a more intimate environment, which I think is extremely valuable. There's something about watching theater close up. There's something about experiencing new theatrical works that is hard to replicate in other art forms. And I think it's a time when I think the arts are always there to elevate us, to civilize us, to make us more sensitive and evolved creatures, we hope. And also for pleasure, right? I mean, it's enjoyable. It's an escape. It's something to do other than worry about our world. If you can go into a theater and just be transported somewhere else for a little while. And I think all of those are valuable. Hi, I'm Angela J. Davis. I'm a Los Angeles-based writer, and it was my sheer joy to be one of the authors of the Zip Code plays. And they are going to be available beginning November 12th for free to anyone who wants to hear them on the Antaeus Theater Company website, as well as on all major podcast platforms.